There is no bigger story than the news that Vice President Kamala Harris has clinched the nomination by delegates in enough states and by enough delegates to be the nominee for the Democratic Party. She will be taking on Donald Trump as she vies to become the 47th president of the United States and the first female president and the first Black woman president and the first Southeast Asian female president. Well, when you are the presidential candidate, you have a job to do. And the first job to do is to pick your vice presidential candidate. Now, the vice president gets to pick a vice president. And Vice President Harris has a bench of new generation Democratic leaders to turn to as she moves towards this critical decision. The list of possibilities is fairly well known and includes Democrats widely seen as possible presidential candidates themselves in 2028. Now, whether or not she faces any competition for that nomination, assuming she wins in 2024, she is beginning to consider who would be her running mate in a race against Donald Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance. Now, the convention for the Democrats will begin on August 19th and will be held in Chicago for the week. That's the nominating convention. But we know there's going to be this virtual roll call that will take place even before we get to the convention. Kamala Harris will turn 60 years old. That is before the actual election in November. So what a phenomenal birthday and way to celebrate your birthday while out on the campaign trail. Well, we're going to be talking in this hour about that decision, this big decision that she's tapped Eric Holder, someone we all know from the Obama administration. He was the Attorney General for Obama for 2 terms, has served with distinction, has been a big champion around voting rights since he left the White House. He's a partner in a law firm. He's a consultant to Democratic leaders. And now he has the task of vetting potential vice presidents. We are going to talk about who's on the list, who's not on the list, surprisingly, and what's the timing of this decision. When is it best? When is the most strategic time for Kamala Harris to announce her vice president? What is she going to be looking for? And how does she combat some of these critiques of her? Still, we hear people say, well, what did she do as vice president? She didn't do anything but stand next to Joe Biden. What did she do? Blah, 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 blah. Well, I have one of the foremost, I should say, expert on vice presidents joining me in this hour. His name is Professor Joe Goldstein. He is a professor of law, emeritus from St. Louis University's Law School in St. Louis, Missouri, my hometown. I have a great deal of respect for him. He's written about this. He's spoken about this. He consults about this issue of vice presidents and their history in the United States. So I can't wait to see what his take is on who is the most likely candidate to add something to a Harris ticket. But before I bring on Professor Goldstein, Representative Carl Sherman is here. You will remember him. He is a Texas state representative. He is the author of the Crown Act for the state of Texas. He's been on the show before, and I'm delighted over the next couple of days, I'm going to be talking to elected officials because many of them are delegates themselves. And also many of them will play a key role in turning out voters in their state. Representative Sherman, welcome back. Glad to have you back today. This is a joyous occasion. Democrats all over the country are fired up and ready to go. We love Joe Biden. He has served this country well. He will go down in history as one of the most effective and one of the most selfless presidents of all times. And he passed the mantle to Kamala Harris. So I first just want to get your impressions when you learned that Joe Biden was stepping aside and then learned minutes after that that he was endorsing Kamala Harris.
Yeah, Areva, thank you so much for having me on this show in real time. It's been exciting. It's been thrilling to see. Certainly, you know, this is historical, this historical moment that will define our future. The President Biden has accomplished so much over such a short term, being 1 term. He's actually accomplished more than most presidents accomplish in 2 terms. Our job unemployment rate is at a historical low of 3.5%. And when I think about the work that President Biden has done successfully, I can't help but think about Ketanji Brown Jackson, our first ever African American Supreme Court Justice, Ketanji Brown Jackson. And now he will be ushering in the first African American female president of the United States, and Kamala. We're excited. I mean,
I can see it
because
all over your
what
face.
she,
You are happy.
yeah, yeah. I mean, what President Harris represents is a devotion to decency, a devotion to diplomacy, and dedication to defend our democracy. I mean, she has been district attorney, she's been attorney general, she's been a United States senator, vice president, and now president of the United States. And Donald Trump doesn't know what's about to hit him, but he trembles because he hasn't done so well with African American prosecutors. New York, Georgia, and DC. He hasn't fared so well. So I'm excited about Vice President Harris being our Democratic nominee. And as the chairman of the Dallas delegation of state legislators in the Texas House and Senate, I got to tell you, we are all proud and unanimously support her being our nominee.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm glad to hear that you are the president of the delegation, which means you will be at the convention. I'm a delegate from the great state of California. And I was looking at the number of delegates that each state has. There was a good article in the Washington Post. And I was thinking that I was expecting Texas to have the number of delegates close to California. Sorry to report you have about half of the 500 delegates that California has. And we were on a call last night with Auntie Maxine, who reminded us, since the vice president hails from California, that we go to the convention as leaders and that the delegation is going to be looking for California delegates to lead, because we will be, giving that last vote to put her over the top. That's the honor that we get since she hails from our great state. I love Texas, but just want you to know California is going to be leading at the convention. So just a little, friendly state rivalry here. But I want to go back to something you said about Joe Biden. I saw a tweet. I have a friend who sends me like all of the political tweets. So I'm up to speed on, everything that's happening on social media around this election. And this is the one that really resonated with me. So look what Joe Biden did for Black people. He had Barack Obama's back for 8 years. And I mean, he had his back. He was a faithful and loyal vice president in ways that, sometimes we don't see in that position. Sometimes there's strife, and they may have had tension, not to say it was a perfect relationship, but he carried himself with such respect and such deference. And here's an older white man having to be second in command to this young Black upcoming star, rising star. And Joe Biden had wanted to be president before Barack Obama, but we never saw any ego tripping on his part. We just saw him standing, in the gap, protecting Barack Obama. And then, as you said, he appoints the first African-American female to our Supreme Court and appoints the first vice president Black woman, Southeast Asian woman, and now passes that mantle to her. I don't know. Donald Trump likes to say he's the best president for Black folks ever. I don't know. We know that's a lie when he says it. People, harken back to Abe Lincoln. But I don't know. Joe Biden is probably going to go down in history as having done more for promoting African Americans on the national stage than any other president that we've ever seen. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. Really, truly, for the real work that he's done. As you stated, it's very challenging in this world in this political arena to find someone who's willing to exalt the office above the individual, is willing to put the people before the politics. That's Joe Biden. I mean, for someone to serve for as long as he has served and has pursued the office of presidency for a very long time. And when he gets it, when he holds that position, he's willing to relent the office and not run for a second term. It doesn't happen. I mean, that's the most powerful position in the world. I've seen what people do on a local level. I've served on a city council. I've served as a mayor. I've seen individuals not want to let go of the office of mayor, and they have to be drug out, But President Biden, certainly the selfless man that he is, was willing to do that, but not after doing hard work, like getting more people on the Affordable Care Act, more people than we've ever had on the Affordable Care Act. Why? Because he was successful in being able to bring down the average monthly cost to $10 for hardworking Americans. Joe Biden focused on getting actual infrastructure needs done and taken care of. While the Congress celebrated Infrastructure Week, Joe Biden was actually getting the work done by ensuring that we got the Reduction Inflation Act passed. And now we have more bridges and roadways and highways being done than ever before. More work done on the local level. And I'll tell you, as a former city manager, that is appreciated when you have a federal government that is actually providing you funding to do projects that make your communities more walkable, more livable. And so we really have, and yes.
And I appreciate how you have so eloquently stated all the reasons we should celebrate Joe Biden. And one of the things I'm celebrating is the fact that now he gets hopefully 10 to 15 years of retirement to spend with his family, to do whatever the hell he wants to do, but to enjoy the fruits of his labor, to know that his legacy will live on forever. Again, thank you so much, Representative Carl Sherman. I will see you at the convention in Chicago. Keep doing the great work you are doing in the great state of Texas. Vice President Harris has a big decision to make, and very soon. And that's the decision of who's going to be her running mate. And here to help us make sense of that big decision is Professor Emeritus Joel Goldstein. He was a law professor at St. Louis University. Thank you for rejoining me, and welcome back to the show, Professor Goldstein. You are one of the preeminent scholars on the role and the office of the vice president. And I'm sure you've been tracking all of the short list, the long list, and the different lists that are being put together for Kamala Harris as she makes this really critical decision. I just want to start by asking you, what are some of the basic things that she should be considering as she vets the various candidates?
Thanks very much, Areva, for having me again. And one of the things that's so unique about this time is that the whole process is compressed. Generally speaking, presidential candidates have anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months to make the decision, to run the process, to make the decision. And Vice President Harris has to do it all within a couple of weeks while she's doing all sorts of other things that people have to normally have months, if not years, to do. I think a number of things that you're looking for. One is that, as you said, Attorney General Holder is leading the vetting process. And so the vetting process is always sort of an initial screen to make sure that none of the people have something that would be too embarrassing to handle on the ticket, or that if there is something in their background, their family's background, that the campaign will know about it and be able to handle it, to assess it and then handle it. Another issue that's important to look at is whether somebody is really ready to perform on the national stage. It's a lot different running for national office than it is running for state office in North Dakota or any other state. And so it's a big leap. And one of the judgments is whether somebody will come through and will handle themselves as a plausible president to reachable voters.
You know, a couple of things have come up in this decision is, can she select another African American, another being because she's African American? Can she select a woman because she's a woman? I had this debate with someone earlier saying, come on, Areva, it's already risky to have a Black woman at the top of the ticket. She can't have two, we America, can't have two Black people on the ticket, and we can't have two white people on, I'm sorry, two women. We often have two white people on the ticket. What do you say to those arguments about we can't have a woman and we can't have a person of color, particularly a Black person?
Well, you know, as you say, we've had the great majority of our tickets have been two white men, and certainly it's at some point in our history we will be at the point where our ticket will be two Black women or two women. Whether we're there now, I think, is really a judgment that the Harris campaign will make, and it is part of their judgment of looking at all the candidates and trying to make the judgment as to who's the best person both to work with Vice President Harris if she's elected president, but preliminarily to help her achieve that aspiration. So you're really looking, since you're making the choice before the election, you're really looking to somebody who can help you get the 270 electoral votes that you need to become president.
So J.D. Vance obviously was selected by Donald Trump. Some folks say that perhaps Trump would not have chosen him had he known that the Democratic ticket was going to, go through this transformation and that Kamala Harris would be running for president rather than on the ticket as vice president. What do you think Donald Trump saw in J.D. Vance that made him select him as his vice presidential candidate?
Well, Senator Vance of President Trump's options, Senator Vance was certainly the one who mirrored the MAGA philosophy and approach most closely, and he was somebody who had demonstrated himself willing to say anything that President Trump wanted said. He changed his positions on a number of issues to really say what President Trump wanted. And I think that
Hold that thought for me, Professor Goldstein. So any other reasons? I mean, does J.D. Vance bring any states that Donald Trump needs to win in order to get those 270 electoral votes?
No, I think you summarized my view very well, Areva. The only thing I would perhaps change in what you said is that I'm not prepared to say that it was a good pick by former President Trump. I think that when you pick a vice presidential running mate, it's important that you pick somebody who's a plausible president. I don't, not at all convinced that Senator Vance, after a year and a half in the Senate, is. And I think even more importantly than the time of experience somebody has had, is the sort of the snap judgments or some of the positions he's taken, which strike me as being careless or reckless, and I think troubling, whether one's a Democrat or a Republican. So I wouldn't say that he's a good pick. I guess to be determined.
And that's such a great point, and we don't hear people talking about that nearly enough. The fact that these vice presidential candidates have to be ready to step in if something happens to the president, and their level of experience is so important. And J.D. Vance, he's a lawyer from Yale. He's a venture capitalist. He's a business owner, but he doesn't have hardly any experience in government or governing inside our federal government or even in state government. His first position as an elected official was as the senator from Ohio, and he's only been in that position less than 2 years. So I hope that folks, as they think about J.D. Vance and the Donald Trump ticket, they think about the level of inexperience. You have Donald Trump, who was completely inexperienced, and we saw how that turned out, not so well. And now he picks someone with even less experience. Let's talk about the list, though, for Kamala Harris.
Sure.
There's some names on here that are not surprising, but there's some names on here that I expected to see, but they're not. Let's start with who's on here. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper. What does he bring to the table?
Well, Governor Cooper has been in North Carolina politics for a number of years. He's been elected governor in a state that is primarily a redder state, and one where the Democrats have had trouble in. And so Governor Cooper would be somebody who might be able to appeal outside of the Democratic base. He and Vice President Harris knew each other, worked well together when they were both attorney generals. And so there's some compatibility there. So I think that's part of what he brings to the table.
So Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Michigan governor, swing state, very important state, a state where Vice President Harris might have some issues because of the Biden-Harris position on the Middle East. Now she's, I think, more pro-Palestinian than at least Biden articulated, not to say that he may have felt differently, but his policies seem to be more in line with Israel. And we know a lot of Palestinians are in that state. Many have voiced their discontent and displeasure with the Biden-Harris ticket. So that's a state she's going to have to spend some time on trying to make sure that those voters don't sit it out. I don't think they're going to be Trump voters. But what could Gretchen Whitmer do? And also got to keep in mind, she's one of the people that often is talked about for 2028.
Well, she's obviously been a successful governor. She was somebody who then Vice President Biden vetted back in 2020 when he chose then Senator Harris instead. Governor Whitmer has made some statements that she's not going anywhere, that she's staying in Michigan. She plans to complete her job. She's a co-chair of the Harris presidential campaign, and I think has been joining Vice President Harris on some of the calls. So she doesn't seem to be as much in the front of the discussion as some of the others.
Okay, Josh Shapiro, young governor of Pennsylvania, Jewish. Pennsylvania, again, white male. Pennsylvania, swing state, an important state for sure. What do you think of him, and what are his chances? What does he bring to the ticket?
Well, he seems to be one of the people who is being talked about a lot. How that translates into where they really stand in Vice President Harris's estimation remains to be seen. But he's a moderate governor. Was elected 2 years ago. Before that was the Attorney General. As you say, it's an important state, 19 electoral votes, and he's been a successful moderate governor. One of the things about selecting a running mate is you're sending messages about what you value. So if you select somebody like Governor Cooper, Governor Shapiro, the vice president be sending a message that she's open to more moderate voices in the Democratic Party and to listening to them, and she wants to reflect the entire party.
Well, that's interesting because Biden and Harris are considered moderates themselves. So progressives like AOC, Bernie Sanders, and others would say that the Harris-Biden administration was incredibly, they're centrist and moderates, and maybe Harris is considered more progressive than Shapiro or Cooper. I'm not sure about that, but I don't see anyone on this list. We're going to keep going down these names that strikes me as being a progressive. They all seem to be pretty centrist in their politics. The other name that's coming up a lot is the very decorated astronaut, U.S. Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona. Arizona, another important state. He's married to a former congresswoman who was shot, a real victim of gun violence. And some people think that that would be a good package deal for the vice president if Mark Kelly was selected. What do you think of Mark Kelly?
Well, he for all the reasons that you outlined, he has a very compelling life story. He's been in the United States Senate since December of 2020, and apparently has good relations with the vice president. So he's one of the people who seems to be in prime consideration. He's been successful in Arizona, which is another a swing state.
Yeah, and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz is on here. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. That's an interesting choice because we know Pritzker too wants to be, or he says stated that 2028 may be a year where he runs for president. He is exceptionally wealthy, could write a big check. Not that the party seems to be wanting for cash. Over the last 48 hours, they've raised a ton of money, but money, you need about $2 billion. Running for president is about a $2 billion proposition. What do you make of Pritzker?
Well, I mean, I think you outlined the case. I mean, he's obviously an able, been a successful governor, up and coming person in the party. I'd be more surprised if he was picked than some of the others who we've talked about.
Yeah, Illinois is just not one of those important swing states, unfortunately. So that may make him a little less attractive. When we come forward, I want to keep going through this list. There's some names on here that I was a little surprised to see. And obviously, a big net has to be cast when you're thinking about vice presidential potential. So I want to talk about some of these other candidates. Cedric Richardson is on this list. We know he's a former congressman from Louisiana. He's been an advisor to Joe Biden in the White House. And Senator Raphael Warnock from Georgia is on this list. So at least I've seen him on somewhere. I keep saying this list. There's not one list. There are several lists floating around. But what do you make of those two? Again, earlier I said some folks believe that because Kamala Harris is Black, not likely that she picks a Black person to run with her or a female. So Warnock and Richardson.
Well, I mean, they're both obviously very able leaders in the Democratic Party. Congressman Richardson had experience in Congress and then in the Biden White House, and Senator Warnock, of course, in the Senate. I mean, I think the question would be whether they would be the people who Vice President Harris determines would add the most to the ticket and help the chances electorally most. And I think that would be the consideration that she would have to take into mind.
What do you think about Bashir? He is a governor of Kentucky. I saw an interview with him recently. So well done. I mean, he was just perfect in terms of his articulation of responses, but he's from Kentucky. And Kentucky isn't necessarily one of those swing states or states that, Democrats have a lot of success with, although he's been elected as a Democratic governor in what is essentially a red state. Does that pretty much, take him off the list?
Well, I mean, I think whether the fact that he's been elected in a red state is what is interesting about him, because that sort of talent, that appeal might transfer elsewhere and might help in a purple state or a swing state. That would be the hope. One of the things that's interesting is that although some of the candidates we're talking about are from swing states, Governor Shapiro, Senator Kelly, some of the others, historically, in recent times at least, that hasn't been much of a factor. I mean, if you think about some of the people who have been running mates, Joe Biden, Dick Cheney, Sarah Palin, Joe Lieberman, from small, safe states, and Vice President Harris from a big state, but also a very safe state. I mean, if the Democrats don't win California, we might as well not put out a ticket. So having somebody from a swing state, it tends to be more emphasized by pundits than by the people who actually make the choice. Having said that, it may be something that Vice President Harris is looking at this time because of the competitive nature of the map.
What about the timing? There are no rules that says, when she has to make this decision. She could wait and reveal the person at the convention. She, in theory, could wait until after the convention. But clearly, given the compressed time schedule and the calendar, when do you think it makes the most sense for her to make this decision?
Well, in recent times, other than Trump, modern presidential candidates have announced the running mate before the convention. Now, I think one of the things on August 7th, it's my understanding that the Democrats are going to have sort of a
virtual roll call.
Virtual roll call. I don't know if that's going to affect the vice presidential choice as well. If it does, it's going to accelerate the announcement of a running mate, even more. And so I think that's one of the things that they have to figure out is whether their target date is August 7th, in which case I would think it would be, a couple days before that, or whether it's the 19th. I would think that it would be before the convention.
Well, I would imagine there's some advantage for her having a running mate, because there goes another surrogate you could put out on the road. And again, she's not running a traditional campaign. She's running the most compressed campaign in modern era. Some folks think, I've heard some pundits say, that this works to the favor of a Black woman, that maybe had this been a more traditional campaign, she would have less of a chance. I'm not sure if I agree with that, but I do agree that having a vice presidential pick and having that person on the road can only help.
Well, I think you're right. And I think the other factor is, if you have a rollout before the convention, it gives you an extra event that gets heavily covered. It's part of the transition. One of Vice President Harris's challenges is, for 3.5 years, we've thought of her as the number 2, and now she's the number 1. And when you pick your running mate, it transforms you into the number 1. Instead of Biden-Harris, we'll think about Harris and fill in the blank. And then the convention can focus not on who's the running mate, but on telling us what her vision is and who she is, and introducing her to the American people in a way that she hasn't been yet.
And so that brings me to the last question I want to ask, and that is about, again, the Republicans say it, and we even hear some Democrats saying she hasn't done anything. Why should she be the president? We should have many primaries, that there shouldn't be a coordination. We even heard Nancy Pelosi say that. And people somehow disassociate the vice president from the record of the president, except when it's bad. They want to pin it to her. But, the $35 cap on insulin, the $16 billion for HBCUs, the, infrastructure bill, the, jobs performance under this administration. How come the vice president doesn't get credit for any of those things that we are now saying are, make Joe Biden one of the most consequential presidents of our era?
Yeah. And Vice President Harris, in my view, has been one of the most consequential vice presidents in modern times. I mean, part of it is the nature of the vice presidency. You don't get the credit. But Vice President Harris has faced some unique challenges that none of her predecessors have. But I think that she's really taken on 2 significant roles. One is as a spokesperson for issues that matter to reachable Democratic voters, reproductive rights, making our society more inclusive of disadvantaged populations, helping people achieve economic mobility, moving up economically, fighting climate change, fighting gun violence, a number of issues like this, preserving democracy, creating a society that is fairer to everybody. And she's really been out there as a spokesperson for the administration. The other thing that she's done that has been under-noticed, I think, is the international role that she's taken on. I mean, she spoke at the Munich National Security event 3 times in the 4 years she's been vice president. Each time was at a critical time in connection with the war in Ukraine. She's been to a number of global events that are presidential level assignments, sometimes that President Biden would do 1 year and she would do the next year. She's been to Asia 6 or 7 times, which is really one of the key areas of the Biden-Harris foreign policy, to develop counter forces against China. She's been to our major allies in Europe 6 or 7 times. She's been to a highly successful trip to Africa. So she's really credentialized herself as a national security and diplomat, and has really made a contribution to the administration in that way as well.
No, those are really, really important points. And as you said, doesn't get nearly enough credit for her international trips and engagement with world leaders. And most importantly, we consider Joe Biden to be one of the foremost, experts on international policies. And she's had the opportunity to sit in the room with and to be tutored by and to be trained by one of the most effective, voices on those issues in our U.S. government. So talk about experience. I mean, that is hands-on, on-the-job training that no other person that even remotely could be considered for this job has ever had. So her accomplishments are many, and I think she deserves credit for all of the domestic policies that we give Joe Biden credit for, because she has been a partner with him, and he made that very clear from day one that she was a partner. I think people look, Professor Goldstein, at those early days when Joe Biden would come out to the press conferences and she would be standing behind him, and they somehow decided that that meant she wasn't doing anything. I mean, that was the early days of the administration. They both were learning the office and learning each other, but that ended quickly, and she's been on the road representing this country in an outstanding manner. And so we are all excited as Democrats. This party has been energized in ways we haven't seen since Obama in 2007 and 2008. We will continue to watch what happens with this vice presidential pick. And thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your expertise and your insights, Joe Goldstein, Professor of Law, Emeritus, St. Louis University.